Hello, everyone. My name is Corey Thornton. I'm the senior editor with the Open Minds Market Intelligence team, and I would like to welcome you to today's Circle Elite Executive Roundtable, how to radically re-engineer your service portfolio, creating innovative new options. Today's roundtable features Thomas Grant, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer for Wood Services, and Open Minds Senior Associate Ken Carr. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping reminders. Your audio will be muted during today's briefing. However, we encourage you to submit your questions using the chat box located on the right-hand side of the screen. I will indicate that shortly with a welcome message. And finally, the slides and recording from today's briefing will be available on the Open Minds website starting tomorrow. And with that, here is Ken.
Thanks so much, Corey. And we're privileged today to have Tom Grant presenting on really how to re-engineer your service line. Just a couple words about Tom before I pass it over to him and his presentation. Tom was appointed the Executive Vice President and the Chief Financial Officer for Woods Services in March of 2016. He engages in short and long-term strategic and operational growth planning for the organization. He brings more than 20 years of finance and strategy consulting experience to the organization. Prior to coming to Woods, he ran his own management consulting firm specializing in efficiency initiatives, leadership, strategic planning, turnarounds, and business development needs of both nonprofit organizations and for-profit businesses. Before launching his own company, he held similar management consulting positions with a number of business development companies. He has counseled clients on a wide range of topics, including process optimization, cash flow management, fundraising, structure, best practices, profitability, and pricing arrangements. He's also worked as an emerging markets analyst in Thailand, Hong Kong, and a number of South American countries. He holds an MBA from the Darden School of Business of the University of Virginia and a bachelor's degree from Davidson College. So as you can see, Tom brings a great deal of experience and expertise, and we look forward to Tom, you doing this presentation here on how to re-engineer your service portfolio.
Well, thank you, Ken. I appreciate the introduction, and if part of that's true, then hopefully this will be okay. All right, well, let me just get us moving here. All right, so we're just going to go through a presentation, and then Ken and I will go through questions and hopefully have a lively discussion at the end of this. All right, Ken, do you want to speak to this slide?
Just a little bit of the background. You know, with what's happening in our market right now in terms of complex services, really there is this need to continue to look at your service line. Is it the right service line? Does it meet the needs of payers? Does it meet the needs of consumers? And so, you know, having a good system in place is really key. And so our focus today is, you know, how can you take a look at your service portfolio, analyze that, and make sure that you are positioned for financial sustainability moving into the future. So with that, I'll let you go ahead and talk a little bit about Woods then, Tom, and kind of the work that you've done there in re-engineering your service portfolio.
All right, okay, thanks, Ken. All right, so why don't we jump right into this? And so what I'm going to do first is give you a little bit of flavor of what the Woods system of care is all about. And you know, then we can move on into more of the details. So this is a very busy slide here with a lot of information. The important stuff that I think you need to take away from this is that Woods by design has stayed much more regional, where in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, we operate direct operations, and we also have 6 affiliates, a growing number, I would say. We serve 23,000 kids, adolescents, and adults. We have referrals from 175 different school districts for the schools we operate. Collectively, we have revenue of about 400 million, a little less than that, and about 6,000 employees. And so this is spread across Woods and its affiliates, and you can see the logos for each at the bottom of the page. The thing, though, that puts us all together is the concept of population health management. What we're doing, which I think is different, is that we've worked intentionally to create a system of care to manage the overall health, not just thinking about medical care, but all the factors, the determinants that go into care for children and adults. And the little tree there shows an example of many of the types of programs we have. All right, and so I mentioned social determinants of health, and we do have a patient-centered care model that brings in the physical health in addition to behavioral health, residential care, community care, and in fact, we just got certified by NCQA. We're I think the nation's first patient-centered medical home with a focus on individuals with disabilities. So that's something that we're really excited about. That just happened this past week. And so on the left, taking a look at the social determinants of health, I think that's pretty well understood. But as far as executing on it across the different touch points, that's something that we're really excited to do. Okay, we are not going to read this whole list, but it is available for you to read, starting with physical health, allied health, the kind of therapies we provide, residential education, all the way down to day programs and social enterprises. Now, this is even more detail and showing which of our affiliates do what ages. Again, this is something that it will be available through the recording, and I think the presentation is also available too. Okay, and if you want more details, what we're going to talk about is we actually did write a book about where Woods was. We were a very traditional developmental disability provider, say in the early 2010s, and what's happened to change what Woods is from what was the Woods schools and then Woods services to what's now the Woods system of care. And this is a book that is available on Amazon as a download, a hard copy, and we can also get you copies if you would like. All right, so let's begin. The current management team, we all came together in 2016. And it looked pretty good when we came in. Revenue was up 9%. Operating profit was great. We had a 4.3% margin. Everything looked really good. But then things changed. So at our very first leadership meeting, when we had the whole new team together, including our new CEO, we had a number of disability rights organizations that came in unannounced, and it came as a complete shock. These were organizations that came in, and I think, frankly, they were looking to shut Wood Services, the campus-based residential program, down. There was a lot of negative feedback and perception about our programs. We were institutional and clinically outdated. And one of these organizations issued a terrible report. It was in the news. It was well published, unfortunately, and it was also untrue. And it was something that we did not take that sitting down, which I think is unusual for the traditional developmental disability or human services providers. So we fought back. That was a very big thing that I think is different than in terms of how we were operating and just the culture we were starting to set. That we sued. We actually settled in 2018, and it was a very satisfactory settlement from our perspective, although we can't really tell you more about that. We also worked on our public image, how we were perceived, on our relations with our funders and regulators, and we started our clinical transformation. That what we did was a lot of thinking, that while the reports and the basis for the attack was unfounded, we did take a look at how we were perceived in the kind of services that we were providing and what could be different. And that's the basis of our clinical transformation, where we made a determination that the old status quo was not sustainable and it was not the most clinically appropriate for our residents. And so we started thinking about how we could be different. And so we thought about our programs, our clinical offering, education, safety, our staff, and where we needed to go. I think what's important, and the reason why I'm talking about it today, is that this was a really big and expensive program. That if we were to keep going in the direction we were going, we weren't going to be able to fund the kind of change that we were looking for. This is a huge investment in our clinical capabilities, a lot in training our existing staff. It was bringing in new members of our team. And we had to figure out ways to pay for this. And the answer is simply, we found the money on how we were going to do it. So we looked for quick and early wins wherever we could. We had a legacy defined benefit plan like state employees have, and that didn't even cover all of our employees. We fully froze that, and we ended up replacing that with a 403B plan, providing a great benefit for all employees, not just our old employees, but this was a way to attract new staff too. And it was a way to start shoring up Wood's financial stability. We also went and looked at the systems we had. And I think for the human services industry in general, there hasn't been a lot of money available, and it's been hard to invest in new systems or up-to-date systems. So many providers, ourselves included, we had to work with what we had, and a lot of it was frankly obsolete. And so that meant that we, with funding that we were able to create through more efficiency, we invested in a new electronic health record, an electronic medical record for our health center, a new general ledger system for our accounting, and HRIS that we consolidate Woods and our affiliates that we then had into the same payroll system. And we've embraced and adopted a lot more in the way of technology. We also, on the clinical side, came up with a program called UCARA, which is a restraint avoidance program, which involved a significant investment in training, as well as in pads to help our staff avoid restraints that were not necessary, and to provide for greater safety for the residents that we serve. That's been a big success, and the performance data that we have really backs that up. A lot of this, though, with any change involves communication. We need to communicate the need and urgency for change. For organizations that are larger, I think sometimes there can be a bubble sort of an environment where I might speak with Ken, for example, and say, Ken, you're great. And he says, no, you're great. And then we believe each other is great, even though the rest of the world might not believe that. And so we had to explain to our employees, many of whom are very loyal and long-serving, why we needed to change in terms of how we provided service, how we actually managed, how we use technology, how we provide benefits. And so that's been a real big win for us. But it was not easy. It took time, and it took a lot of emphasis to help employees understand why change and why change now. Because sometimes change can be easiest when it's too late, and we did not want to get to that point. We did a lot of to invest in our employees. We created affordable cohorts with area colleges and universities for master programs. We created a defined career ladder to show direct care workers up to more senior managers where we could go. We also created a master's program that we run with a local university. And that's been important because that's a great way that we can identify future leaders of the organization for Woods and its affiliates. Another thing that we did to create that culture is we established our Social Innovations Lab, which was a way to get our employees to come up with ideas and have funding for those ideas so that we could both come up with new programs that are innovative, but also to identify more of the go-getters within our ranks. And that's something that we've seen great success on. And some of those projects are relatively small. And some have become social enterprises on a much larger scale. As well, on the clinical side, we recognized that in addition to the residential capabilities we had, that we needed more. And so we looked for potential affiliations, and we're fortunate enough to have Legacy Treatment Services join us. And we could have built behavioral health capabilities, and that would have taken us a much longer time, and it would also have been very expensive. With Legacy as a partner, we were able to adopt a lot of their insight and expertise and bring it to Woods and other affiliates on a much more rapid basis. We also, with Legacy, as well as our other affiliates like Allies and Archway and Bryan's House and Tabor, recognized that we had a lot of strength and capabilities with each of our affiliates. And that meant it was not a command and control from the top approach. It was listening and collaborating and adopting better ideas that might be had within the family. And that we mentioned systems like our general ledger system. We did not take the system that Woods had. We ended up using a system that one of our affiliates had. And we also benefited from the built-in expertise, just as we had it on the clinical side, but also in a lot of other supporting areas. And we've also worked hard to create shared services so that we can partner with our affiliates and save a lot of money. Now, let's take a look at service lines. And we've talked a little bit at a higher level about what matters to get an organization going. What are some other areas that we can really work on? But if we take a look at service lines, this is an important area that you can have supporting areas, but if your underlying capabilities are not what they should be, it doesn't much matter. So many of you are familiar with Jim Collins. He wrote a terrific book called Good to Great. And one of the major models that's presented in that book is what's called the hedgehog principle. And I like it because it's really simple. That you ask yourself, what are you deeply passionate about? What can you be best in the world at? And what drives your economic engine? And so there are a lot of ways that you can look at this. And so one that I've used is, let's just say I'm deeply passionate about dancing. I'm not, but it's a good example. I'd have to ask myself, in addition to my passion, are you good at it? Can I be the best in the world at it? Maybe you are the best dancer in the world, so you could do that. But then, are you going to get paid for it? Will that be your economic engine? And so you really need to get all three for that to work. And so in the case of Woods, could we be deeply passionate about caring holistically for individuals with developmental disabilities and behavioral challenges? Yeah. As far as what we can be best in the world at, and I would not say we're the best in the world. We certainly have our aspirations for the kind of care we provide, and can we get paid for it by providing differentiated services? And that was where we said, yeah, we could. And so that was the basis of the target that we took. So when you get down to it, as far as your service lines, looking at what do you do? I mean, how do you define it? Do others do it too? Do they do it the same way? Can you understand how much it costs and how do you get paid? These are pretty simple questions, but as far as getting everyone on your team to agree with what the answers are, that can be a big roadblock. And so making sure that you have the same foundation is very important so that everyone's in agreement with these questions. That do you understand what you do, and why you do it? And so is it a question that you, for example, manufacture drills, or are you providing a way for people to make holes they need? And so we might provide residential care versus, or a house to live in, versus we're providing care and enriching life for some of the most vulnerable members of society. It's getting so that we perceive that we're doing the same thing. And some of the stuff, as a CFO, I can say, understanding how you get paid, that can be easier, but your program staff might not understand that. So it's important to reach agreement on all this. Okay, and so to that point, how do you define your services? And how do you break these down? This is like a market segmentation, locations, the funders, the type of service. Does it vary by age? Does it vary by the kind of clinical interventions that are served? Are there other factors, for example, medical fragility? And do you do different things in different places on behalf of different funders? And then measuring how much you do in volume or value. And for success, a lot of organizations traditionally have measured on outputs, but as far as outcomes, are there ways to measure outcomes as to why the service matters? Why are you providing it? That you can provide X number of units of service. Are your clients that you serve better off for it? How do the funders understand and appreciate what you're doing? Then I think finally, why do you do this? And understand why you come to work every day, but how is this relevant to your overall mission? Okay, and going to the question of how others do it, taking a look at the competitive landscape that as not-for-profit organizations, we like to think of other organizations as peers and respect them, but we are competing. We are competing to provide many different types of services that other providers typically can provide. And how can we differentiate ourselves? So that could be on the basis of geography. Is it on a statewide basis, regional, counties, or other ways? Understanding who is playing in the same sandbox as you in terms of size and geography, and how does the market get segmented? If you were to take a look at law firms, would it be based on at the company work versus just a very mundane everyday transaction? And it can be the same with a service provider. Is it a high acuity type of client who's served, or is it someone who's very high functioning and needs little in the way of support? So there are a lot of different things to look at. And so it's location, funder, types of service, the types of clients that are served. And there's the reputation of the program. I think we all, based on our own internal biases and how we perceive our own organizations, think we're really good. But it's understanding and getting views from others as to how we're perceived. Are you the go-to for a particular area, or are you the guy that they call when there's just no other capacity anywhere else? And with the shortage of providers and capacity, it could be, yes, you are the go-to and you're the only one available, but that's something that's important to understand. And as far as how you differentiate your program, you might have one idea, but do your funders really agree on that? That's important. And I think the final heavy question to think about here is, if your program was closed tomorrow, it would be a big deal for your employees. It would be an even bigger deal to the clients you serve and their families. But would it be a big deal to funders and to regulators? And so if, for example, there's a group home provider with 4 homes, the answer is no, it probably would not be a big deal. That capacity could be addressed by someone else. But if you're much larger, it becomes a much bigger deal for the funders and the regulators. What's going to happen? How do you replace that service? And that's an important thing in terms of what your influence is, how you can actually work with your counterparts that are funding you. Okay. Then as far as those relations, it's important to understand the cost for each service line. We might even have a home with people with different levels of need. And so we do need to understand how those costs vary, location to location, or even client to client. There could be behavioral needs, there could be an acuity, there could be services that are provided like physical therapy or cognitive therapy. And when you take a look at those costs, does it make sense how you're allocating them, or do you have them in large buckets? So it's hard to understand what those expenses are. It also makes sense to take a look at what your indirect costs are. How do you allocate these between programs? Because even though indirect costs or overhead seem like they're pretty much fixed, there are situations where if you do make a big change in programs, those overheads will change and they can be reduced, or if you're growing, increased. And so we like to think about a contribution margin approach. There's some things that for programs that can be controlled. Typically that's labor with the benefits load on top of that. But there are other costs like insurance that are much more outside of the program's control, unless of course there's a very high risk aspect to the program. But we like our program leadership to understand and manage what they can manage. And then for other factors, that's more of a leadership challenge. It's important to know who owns this performance. Do your residential managers, your program managers for clinical, do they understand or care about the fiscal performance? That's something that really does matter. And for understanding the unit cost is absolutely essential if you're going to negotiate rates or try and control costs. And excuse me, as we move to the future, value-based pricing is going to be a very big deal. And you can't be successful with a value-based approach if you have no idea what your costs are, and especially within the nuances of services you provide. Okay, and then understanding how you get paid. Again, this is something that your revenue cycle and billing team are probably very knowledgeable about, but many others within your leadership team or even your managers might not understand that. And the basic funding structure can vary even within an organization, including big ones like fee for service or cost reimbursed, managed care. I mean, is there a capitation, or is there a different value-based approach? And do you have multiple funders, for example, for the same service? That could be private or private insurance pay. That could be multiple states placing individuals. Or do you have just a single funder for a program? And there can be similar services with alternate funding streams. And that can vary between locations within an organization. It's also a very key area to understand how the funding is determined. Does a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in our case, dictate what the rates are? Is this just saying you will take this and you will accept it and that's it? Is it analyzed based on your presentation of what your expenses are? Or are you able to negotiate that and control access into or out of a program? And one of the biggest powers that we as providers of service have is the power to say no. However, if you only have one service and one funder, you don't have very much power to do that at all. And that presents a challenge, I think, for most organizations. As far as just going back out to the billing area, how do you ensure that you get paid timely? Do you have a team of experts that understand your revenue streams and how to optimize billing and manage your cash flow? And as I mentioned a second ago, understanding if you can say no. If something doesn't make sense or the funder's a pain to work with, can you say, I'm done, I'm out? And if you have only 4 group homes in one county, probably not, but some organizations have had to make that choice. But if you have a variety of funders or services, you have more of an ability to stick to your guns. Okay, now let's talk about change. So once you understand more about your organization, then you have choices about where you go with that good understanding where there's agreement on where you stand, that you can invest, grow, divest, or shrink, get rid of programs that are weak, reposition within a particular service area, or just maintain the status quo. And as we all know, it can be a real slog to pay for all of this. Okay, here's something that has been a huge win for us. When we take a look at our expenses, as a general rule, about 80% of our expenses are people and benefits, which is typical for providers of care for individuals with disabilities. One of the biggest areas, though, after labor is health coverage. And what I'd like to highlight here is that when we were looking for opportunities early on to realize cash, we were already self-funded for health coverage. And you don't have to be as large as you might think to do it. You can be as small as, say, 50 or 150 on the small side to be able to have a self-funded plan. What we did was we looked into what's called reference-based repricing. We now price or pay for our health benefits with reference to what Medicare would pay for the same thing, that a commercial insurance provider like a Blue Cross might pay 220% of Medicare based on a negotiated price agreement with a particular hospital, whereas we take a look at Medicare and we'll pay somewhere between 130 and 150. And you need a specialist to work with on that, but that's been a very big area of savings for us. The thing to bear in mind, though, is that you need a good consulting relationship rather than a traditional brokerage relationship. Brokers, in many cases, are conflicted. In addition to commission they might get from you, they can also get overrides for giving more business to, say, Aetna or to Blue Cross. And so you want someone who truly has interests aligned with you. You need to understand who's using your benefits and who pays, in the sense of how much your employees pay versus how much does the employer pay. And that's something we've been able to keep our costs really low for our employees for a long time. And we have, on the pharmacy side, for example, $5 copays for generics, which is almost like a government employer. On the pharmacy side, we've realized huge savings by adjusting our pharmacy benefit management. And we've also looked at things like script sourcing for very expensive medications. And so there are big opportunities there. And retirement, having a competitive plan design with a very good record keeper makes a big change, and it's helped our employees, it's helped retention, and it's also helped us mitigate risk in terms of any sort of plan discrimination. And our HR team is much happier with the change. Okay. People is another big area. We were lucky that we started with a supportive board. We did have to sell what our vision was and get buy-in for that. That took some time, but with the support of our board, if there are bumps along the way in the short term and the medium term, there's much more patience if they are on board with where we are going. On the leadership side, Jim Collins talks about the idea of having the right people on the bus, and then sometimes even figuring out what seats on the bus those folks have. We find that culture and skills are the most important, and there are technical needs, of course, but we have had people move around within our leadership team, and that helps to round skills and an appreciation of the organization. But we did make changes early on to ensure that we had people who were bought in with what the vision was, that once the team has made a decision, you do need to get with it. And that's been an area where we had to make difficult decisions early. And to have a supportive leadership team, it means we're all rowing in the same direction. We do have much stronger program leadership, and we were able to identify leaders within our programs who were enthusiastic for change and for just bringing some charisma where it was needed. Risk is something that we do have, that if we take no risk, we do nothing and go nowhere. But we have to take very sensible risks and mitigate the downside where we can. And that's been something that getting our team comfortable with, that's allowed us to provide care in areas where perhaps we would not have made admissions in the past. And we have a community-based program for much more involved individuals, and that's been a big area for us. As far as policy and thought leadership, we want to make sure that our regulators, our funders, and the general population understand what we're doing and why. And so we've spent a lot on research. Our former CEO actually leads a research institute for us, where we've been able to demonstrate the steps we're taking are delivering results, which goes back to the whole idea of outcomes. The other thing which has been a big aha moment for me in particular is the importance of policy leadership. That I think most of our organizations have relied on industry associations in the past, which tend to be a little bit more passive. And we've engaged and worked with lobbyists where we've needed to, and have a very senior policy thought leader on our team, which has helped us to change the conversation, to help us drive our message of the importance of a patient-centered approach and an overall system of care. So I brought the slide up again, and the whole idea is after you've thought about and you understand what you're good at, I think we all have a sense as to what we're passionate about, but when you take a look at, excuse me, your operations, after you've gone through this analysis and thinking with your team, it is important to go back and say, well, what can you be the best of the world at, and what are you just kind of so-so at? Are there areas that you might not be best to be involved in? And then understanding the financial side, what are you going to get paid for? Because we all know that with no money, there is no mission. And so this is something that we pause and we think about this a lot as we think about our growth. And by having the economics right, we've been able to take our passion and identify other areas where we can grow by having the resources to invest and to take some of those risks. So what's next for us? We all know that there are a lot of unmet needs out there. And we think about the integrated care within a population health model. We have behavioral health, the primary care. We have a partnership with the University of Pennsylvania's Penn Dental School to provide special needs dentistry now. We're working with large hospital organizations in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania, and we're working on providing specialty care too. And so the value add is managing all aspects of the life cycle for our population in community settings, at home with families, in group homes, even in campus-based settings where that's most appropriate. And we're helping funders and government to understand opportunities and challenges. And with our policy and research, we're getting an audience, and that's made a difference. Politicians are hungry for solutions, especially ones that can be more effective and take tax dollars a lot further. And in general, there has been a perceived shortage of ideas in the sector, that we might complain about staffing crises and that we don't get enough money. But as far as how we're going to do something differently, we haven't done a good job of getting the message out. And so that's something that we see a huge opportunity in. For Woods and our affiliates, we definitely have been fortunate because of this, that we have the funding, and we believe with ideas we can get more. We have operating surpluses to back us up. That allows us to invest. We have the support of funders for new program ideas. For example, the high intensity homes in the community, they're taking kids and adults out of hospital settings, saving money and providing much more home-like care. And we're achieving alignment with the government at all levels. And given all the regulatory challenges for disability providers, that's been a big win for us. And how are we going to do this as far as actually growing more? Organically, we are creating new programs. We have partnerships with health systems. I mentioned Penn Dental, we have Penn Medicine, RWJ Barnabas, which is the largest health provider in the state of New Jersey. We're working with managed care organizations. And then on the M&A side, we do want to work with really strong partners. When we've affiliated with organizations, we've invested in these organizations as partners and in their leadership teams. We're looking for not only just capabilities and the provision of service, we're looking for leadership teams that are really good. And that's something that collectively we think we're better, stronger, and we need, when we do partner, the leadership is probably the most valuable asset that comes along. Okay, and how we do this is just a very brief thing. I won't go into too much detail. This gives an idea of how we're structured as a parent, and then each partner has its own identity and board of directors with reserve powers, and that's something you can look at your leisure. Now, our founder was Molly Woods, and she said later in her career in leading the organization that we've always been a pioneer, and we must continue to pioneer and to grow, because that's living itself, and that's something that we really do stick to. So thank you very much, and I think we're open for discussion now.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. That was, I think, a great example of how an organization can do some transformation, create new service lines, and end up with some financial sustainability. And we encourage any of our attendees to add some questions into our chat box there. In the meantime, I have a couple of questions for you. I'm quite impressed. Looking at Woods, we talk about 200 programs addressing the needs, multiple needs of individuals in an integrated way, different locations across the age spectrum. There's a lot of complexity that goes into that and managing that service line. And I think, one aspect of having a successful service portfolio is, one, of course, it has to align with your mission, but does it have financial sustainability? And that's financial sustainability is driven and connected quite a bit to quality as well. So I guess my question for you is, do you have a formal process with these 200 different programs to be on a regular basis kind of assessing where do they fit in terms of financial sustainability and quality and everything that makes them of value both to Woods and to the community? So, talk a little bit about, maybe a formal process. Do you look at things quarterly, monthly? Do you have metrics? How do you do that?
Well, we've invested a lot in better budgeting and reporting technology. And that's something that it's an ongoing effort to roll out dashboarding so we can take a look at the performance of these programs. We do take a look at, because we're a system of care, we recognize that there are certain programs that on their own, they might not be as financially viable, but they're absolutely essential for the overall family of services that we provide, that if we didn't have a particular offering, we might not be as relevant and we might not be able to fulfill our overall mission. We do take a hard look both at the affiliate level or affiliate boards, as well as with ongoing discussions with Woods itself on our own programs, as well as those of affiliates, to understand the ongoing viability of the programs. And we look to our affiliate leaders to help us understand what's viable and not. We have had to make difficult decisions on programs because we do have the resources available. It's not a decision that we take lightly to say, no, this program is not viable. It's something that's a long and thought out process to ensure that the well-being of those that we serve is number one. If the program is not delivering great outcomes, though, we look on how we can improve or change a program also. But yeah, there are definitely programs that from time to time we've reached the unfortunate decision that we can no longer do it. Collectively, we don't want to get in a position where we are taking away our overall mission viability due to erosion in a particular program area. And there are programs that what we've learned over time that policymakers politicians and government leaders just don't seem to value like they value other programs. And even if we see an importance for a program, if there's a clear determination that there's no future in that program area, we don't want to be trapped where we're providing a no longer relevant service. And we have and will continue to take a hard look at those areas. There's some that sometimes on the policy area we can help government to understand why a program area is important, but sometimes not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that those are some of the difficult decisions. You had a slide in your presentation about change options, invest or grow, divest or shrink, which is kind of what we're talking about now. There may be some programs that you have to end or divest of, repositioning and maintaining. And of course, I've been of the perspective that, you know, maintaining only works when you're in an environment that has no change whatsoever, which isn't the reality of you know, our environment here delivering services. So, you know, you have that divest and shrink side of things. I also recall early in your presentation, you talked about clinical transformation and what a role that clinical transformation played in who you are now, how you were able to grow, the greater impact you have now in communities. So you have that clinical transformation piece, and then you have these options around invest, grow, divest. So thinking in terms of your role, Tom, there as the CFO, you know, talking about clinical transformation, but then the business side of, do we invest and what do we invest in that clinical transformation? What do we maybe reposition around, or what can't we pursue? Talk a little bit about the role you as CFO had in that clinical transformation and the business side of that.
I think there are a couple of ways to think about it. One, there's obviously funding the transformation, being able to come up with a way that we can make it viable. That if we've identified the particular cost, for example, hiring more psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers, that would be a cost that we would have to be able to support. Investing in our physical health capabilities. And I think an insight there is that we might, by providing a capability, not be able to cover all the costs directly. For example, by having a particular medical specialty, but by having that available, that can open the door to funding and admitting a type of client with needs that we can address effectively and be funded for, and thereby support some of those indirect expenses that might not be directly covered. And so if you were running, say, an urgent care clinic in the community, you would have to cover all of your costs directly. But where we have the equivalent of urgent care plus other services, we can cover a good part of that cost. But because we also have the need to have on-site health capabilities, or for nearby community locations, we have another way to provide support for that. And that in turn, by avoiding emergency room admissions, we've been able to demonstrate to funders that we are saving money in ways that would be unexpected. And so I think that can be one way. Another thing is that depending on the level of resource that an organization has, there can be different runway lengths as far as how soon something has to work. We've been able to take a longer view as we invest. And because even if in some cases we build it, we know that we might not be able to make everybody come immediately. That's going to take a little bit of time. And so as a CFO, having a longer range view that I've been involved in all the strategic discussions that as far as what we need to do as a leadership team. We think about where the industry is going, and it's not just that here's what we've decided to do, provide the money and tell us how much it's going to make. That's not how we operate at all.
Yeah, just kind of a follow-up question. Thinking about your role there, we often talk about the changing role of the CFO. And during this transformation, and as you've been in Woods, as you've grown substantially, you've had to have a really good sense of financial information, right? Your ability to kind of crunch numbers and do financial analysis. You've also obviously had to have a big role in communication, bringing people along, talking with staff, talking with board members. And then there's this whole piece of strategy, the CFO as strategist, because you're looking at this transformation, the business models, your 4 questions of what will you do? How do others do it? How much does it cost? How are you going to get paid? That's a big part of the strategy. How would you divide up your skill set, your time between those 3? If you're put a percentage on each of those, kind of putting you on the spot, what would you say the percentage of your time and expertise goes into each of those? Financial analysis, communication, and then financial strategy in particular.
Well, as far as the traditional accounting function, that I review more what the output is, that we have a great team, and it's understanding what the numbers mean and asking what the numbers mean. That there's the operational side of how can we have a faster close, that I'll get involved in that, but I don't get down to level of journal entries and approving that. I work with our auditors, which I think would be more traditional role. Spend a lot of time with our program leadership and with our affiliate leadership, understanding each organization, the performance, what's coming, what potential ideas are, suggesting ideas on how we could grow or fund a project. If there are operational areas where there needs to be improvement, I do jump in to help with that a lot too. If we need to work more closely in a particular program area, I might, that would be an area I get involved in. An area that you didn't mention where I also spend a fair amount of time is on funder negotiation and working with state, county, and local agencies on rate negotiations, understanding expense, and sharing what our ideas are for growth. The development side, from time to time, even working on grants, that's an area where we see a huge opportunity to fund our growth by going out for compelling grants or making a case to create a grant. So that would be another area. So I think that it can vary day to day. Another area, though, I think also is governance. I serve on most of our affiliate boards, and so that's another thing. So maybe governance about a quarter of the time, direct financial and analysis another quarter, working with longer term strategy, probably another 25%. And then everything else, including IT and IS, managing benefit plan design. For example, this week and last week, I've been working a lot on long-term strategies for protecting the participants in our old defined benefit plan. And we've been able to do a lot, and that in turn is going to protect Woods by defeasing most of our liabilities. And so I think one of the greatest things is that I get to spend a lot of time in a lot of different areas. And that makes no day all that typical, and it means that it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think we're always as CFOs trying to figure out how can we best contribute to the organization, and it's more than just financial management and managing that side of the organization. We only have about 5 minutes. I have one final question. I was really interested when you talked about your social innovations lab, being able to tap that. And often I talk to organizations, innovation is a priority, but getting good ideas, moving and implementing innovation. Could you just in maybe 2 or 3 minutes just talk a little bit about your innovations lab, how that's contributed, maybe how that's structured a little bit, and then we'll turn things back over to Corey.
Annually, we do that for Woods and our affiliates, and any employee is eligible on his or her own or with a group of colleagues to pitch an idea as far as what we can do. And let me give you one example. We have a bus driver on the main Woods campus who came up with the idea that screen printing could be an area where clients could work. And he presented the idea. He had no background in the screen printing himself, but he was able to deliver it in such a way that he created enthusiasm on the part of the judges, which are a combination of the executive leadership, senior management, and some of our board members, that this was a really neat idea. And it got legs. There was an investment made in it. At first, I think it was $50,000. And then we were able also to get grant money too. And so now we have a full-fledged print shop. We also do embroidery, and for employee uniforms and swag and other branded items, we have a complete lineup. When we have an event in the community, like we have a run coming up in early May, we print the shirts in-house. If an organization out in the community needs t-shirts or pants or other items, we can print those. And our residents are working there. And so that's one of the more fun examples. We have other things that where we've had grants and support, building up a barn where we've done a lot to engage kids and adults with disabilities through friendly animals. And it's something that I love that personally, that we have these giant Flemish rabbits that are like about this big, 3 or 4 feet long, that we just got, and it creates an excitement, and our staff get excited. And that's when we listen to our staff and their ideas that come up, we support them. They're not always going to be great ideas. Some of them are definitely out there, but some of them are not. And identifying who has the hustle, who has the creativity to come up with an idea and to support someone in that way, that we've been able to promote future leaders and encourage them to and support them in education. So it's been a really neat process, and we've been able to roll that out to our affiliates and seen a good impact.
Great examples of innovation there and how that ties into service line development. So appreciate you sharing those. We're pretty much out of time. Tom, I want to really thank you for the presentation, and have learned a lot from you. Enjoy working with you on this presentation and just thinking in terms of service line development. So thank you for taking the time today to do that. And Corey, we're going to pass it back to you. I think you have a couple final slides here that you want to cover before we end the webinar.
That's right, Ken and Tom. Ken, thank you both again. I want to thank everybody in the audience for joining us for today's web forum. I also want to remind everybody that the slides and the recording for this will be available on the Open Minds website starting tomorrow. The full Circle Elite Executive Roundtable series is also available on demand as part of the extensive Open Minds library. And I'd like you all to join us for our next roundtable next week, Thursday, April 27th at 1 p.m., Maximizing Productivity Settings in a Mixed-Use Workforce, the Southwest Behavioral and Health Services Case Study. For a full list of upcoming roundtables or to register for that event, please visit the Executive Roundtables page that is under the Events tab at www.openminds.com. Thomas, Ken, you guys have been great. Thank you again. And everybody, on our resources for this event, you will also see a complete schedule for our annual institutes. Gentlemen, thank you again and have a great day.
Thank
Thanks.
you.